So welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I'm talking about Thebe Magugu Spring Summer 21 collection. But before I continue, you can follow me on Instagram at Fashion Roadman, and you can also follow me on Twitter at Fashion Roadman. So for some background knowledge, Thebe Magugu is a South African fashion designer. In 2019, he became the first African designer to win the LVMH prize. And when looking at his work, it's normally this South African twist on Western fashion tropes. He often references his heritage and his upbringing in his work. Now for his Spring Summer 21 collection, Thebe Magugu was inspired by a series of interviews he conducted with confessed, tried and detained female ex-spies. These are spies who worked either for the apartheid government or defected to the other side, essentially becoming double agents in the process. Thebe Magugu actually started getting inspiration for this collection after reading a book titled Betrayal: The Secret Lives of Apartheid Spies by Jonathan Answer. And this book is basically just a book that highlights the life of various South African spies during the apartheid times and just following them and asking them questions and interviewing them essentially. Now, it would be difficult for me to explain this collection to you without first explaining to you what apartheid is. So for people who don't really know too much about apartheid was a racial discriminatory policy in South Africa that was enacted in 1948. Now, apartheid is a very complex concept that I could talk about for hours, but I'll do my best to summarize it and kind of just tell you the little nuggets that are more relevant to the references in this collection. So during that time, a lot of laws were put in place to separate black people from mainly the white Dutch settlers. So there are many different acts that were implemented. There is the Group Areas Act, which assigned different racial groups to different residential and business areas. There was the Prevention of Illegal Squatting Act, which basically gave the government a legal right to evict and forcibly remove certain people from certain neighborhoods. There was the Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act, and this was the prevention legally of interracial relations. And that meant that at the time, if you were a mixed race kid, you were by law a crime, essentially. And I've read a really interesting book by a South African mixed race comedian called Trevor Noah. And he wrote a book called Born a Crime, which was a very, very good read and kind of gives you more of an insight as to what it was like growing up during that time as a mixed race child. There was also the Reservation of Separate Amenities Act, which basically meant that in the legal system, blacks and whites had to be segregated in terms of public amenities, vehicles and services, which meant that essentially black people and white people didn't use the same toilets, they didn't use the same seating areas and so on. Now, apartheid was something that would continue all the way until the 90s, which is crazy to think that the 90s is so recent. Like, I was born in the 90s, so to think that this sort of stuff was happening is completely insane. Now, during apartheid, one of the huge opposing groups was the ANC, which was the African National Congress that fought against apartheid for many, many years. So during this time, tying back into the spies, there were spies who used to spy for the Dutch government, making sure that they were finding out which people were plotting against the South African government and making sure they were killed or they were arrested and jailed or punished. And that's kind of what happened to Nelson Mandela. But then there were also double agents or spies that helped the ANC, because like I said, blacks and whites were legally segregated. So groups like the ANC needed information from the white side and the white neighborhoods and find out what was going in that side. So actually there were some spies who initially were spies for the South African government, but after kind of having a moral fight and moral battle with themselves, actually defected and started spying for the ANC, making them double agents. So now we can't talk about South African spies without talking about the main one and the most infamous spy in apartheid history is a woman named Olivia Forsyth. Now, Olivia, or as her code name was, Agent RS407, was a double agent spy originally working in the security branch of the South African police as a lieutenant, and then she later defuncted to the ANC. Now, I watched an amazing interview that she did, and essentially in this interview she was describing and talking about how when she went to South Africa to work as a spy for the police, she didn't know anything about apartheid. She wasn't educated. And as she was undercover in a university from 1982 to 1985, and she said just being around those people, she kind of was at a crossroads in her life where she decided that the right thing to do would be to help the African National Congress, the ANC, to fight against apartheid by just providing them with information. So she is very, very famous double agent. She's kind of infamous because on one hand, a lot of South Africans do like that she was one of the main players in ending apartheid, but then a lot of people are really critical of her, that if she really cared, why would she run back to Britain immediately she found some sort of adversity? Because her stay in South Africa wasn't all pleasant. Actually, it got to a point where the ANC stopped believing that she was a double agent and really just thought that she was still a spy for, the South African government, and was just playing the ANC to get information out of them. So they kind of flipped on her and she had to flee. And that's a whole different story that I won't get into. But yeah, I thought it was really, really important to talk about Olivia Forsyth because she is referenced in this collection.
Tell me about the Olivia who arrived at Rhodes University.
Well, I arrived there as an officer of the South African security branch. I suppose the one thing I really wish in retrospect is, well, even then, that was that I'd arrived there without being a member of the security branch. Because it was the first time in my life I felt really at home somewhere, when I started learning about what had gone on in South Africa in the decades preceding that, the real history that I'd never learned at high school, the terrible things the apartheid government was doing. I mean, it was the time of forced removals, and the uprooting and the disruption and the terrible effects that apartheid had on people. I only started really learning about then. I had such a cocooned existence. It seems hard to believe. But I honestly, I didn't know anything about that history. I didn't know anything about the ANC. I didn't know anything about the Soweto uprisings. I didn't know anything about that, and I learned it all there. I also started learning about feminism. I'd never come across that before, and that was really meaningful to me. And so I was like a kid learning from like a sponge, all right from the beginning. And that left me with a dilemma. Because there I was, really wishing that I had just come there as a student and that I was doing all this for me. And I was there under false pretenses.
At what point did you decide that it wasn't for you anymore and you wanted to change sides?
It didn't take that long. I knew as soon as I read all and encountered all the anti-apartheid ideology, if you like, I knew straight away. But my dilemma was, what do I do about it? I wasn't just somebody who was a paid informant who could just stop. Of course I could have stopped at any point. People say, well, why didn't you just stop? And that was always a choice. I could have resigned from the police, left. I would have had to leave Rhodes. I would have had to go somewhere else. I probably couldn't ever have really participated in the democratic movement because I would have been an ex-police person, and the police would have made sure people knew that.
So to continue talking about the Spring Summer 21 collection in general, and there are multiple layers to the spy references. Thebe actually looked into how clothes can be used both to hide in plain sight or to stand out, which obviously is a big function and a big role of spies. Spies have to know when to stand out from the crowd, when to fit in. Now, to quote something that Thebe actually said, he said, "Our immediate picture of spies is largely informed by their portrayal in popular culture. Slim, ostentatiously demure, fashionable, and aloof. Truth is, spies are all around us. They are our beloved teachers, friends, and family members. It got me thinking, what drives one to commit high treason?" Now, this obviously was a good statement, and I thought it was really relevant to mention because even if what Olivia Forsyth, most people would say, she's great, she helped end apartheid, but by law, that is treason, and she was a traitor by South African law at the time. He was trying to wonder what would make someone commit treason, like what is their mindset like? And that was what he explored in this collection. And also, what I really like about this statement, he said, our immediate picture of spies is largely informed by their portrayal in popular culture, fashionable and aloof. Now, I think this stereotype is kind of pushed by all these spy movies we see, if it's from James Bond to the likes of, you know, all those British, like Johnny English kind of movies where men are wearing these Hugo Boss suits and all that stuff and going to Savile Row. When in actual fact, the whole point of spies is they're supposed to blend into the environment. So they could be teachers, they could be students amongst us, like he said. And just going back to Olivia Forsyth, she was actually an undercover student. So I thought it was really, really interesting that he did mention that. Now in this collection, in terms of the looks, we saw a huge variety. And part of it was a reference to the versatility in dressing of spies in general. And this is why we see everything from blouses to knitwear to tailoring and much more. Now, one of the cool references in this collection was, so Thebe Magugu interviewed Olivia Forsyth for this collection, and he actually scanned her fingerprints and printed her fingerprints on some of the pieces. So some of the pieces, it looks like a polka dot design, but actually when you look closer, you find out those are actually Olivia Forsyth's fingerprints that he made into a polka dot design, which is so intelligent. I really love how he merged that reference, and it's so subtle, and you really have to look deep to really get and catch that reference. And to quote what he said about this, he said, one of the spies I spoke to, Olivia Anne-Marie Forsyth, provided me with her scanned fingerprint, which now enjoy a polka dot effect, which, yeah, just amazing. Now, there were obviously a lot more intelligent commentaries on the spies and apartheid through this collection. And one of them was he transformed a knit fringe dress that is kind of like a basic thing. Everyone has like a knit fringe dress. It's a staple in dressing. But what we normally see is black fringe dresses. But in this collection, we have a bright yellow fringe dress. So actually, what this was a reference to was that kind of like hiding in plain sight, because he's used a silhouette and a garment that is kind of an everyday garment. A lot of people have it. It's very common. You can find it in fast fashion stores. But he's added a color that makes it pop. And it's this dichotomy between being a spy and wanting to hide in plain sight, but also the silhouette is something that's subtle. I thought that was a really, really intelligent reference. Now, looking at look 3, there's this lightweight denim suit in a mustard color. And what really interested me was how he described the bag that the model was holding. He said, the A4 leather satchel is password protected to save any dirt you have on a friend, which obviously is another reference to just being spies and saying the bag is password protected and stuff. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think there were many interesting touches in terms of the accessories in this collection, whether we're talking about the really long gloves or the sheriff hats that obviously sheriffs the police, which is another reference to Olivia Forsyth, because Olivia Forsyth works for the South African police. So there's kind of a police reference in that design. Obviously there are berets, which obviously is another reference to security. And yeah, just many more references that I thought were quite interesting. Continuing on the theme of spyware, there was this amazing wool-tailored jacket, and he actually said that if you lift up the right lapel on this jacket, there's actually a microphone symbol, which obviously is just a reference to, you know, being undercover, being a spy and being mic'd up and being, you know, people monitoring the audio everywhere you go and stuff. I thought that was a really, really interesting touch. And I think these references are really intellectual, they're really intelligent, but I think the most intelligent of them all was on a Parker jacket. Now, there was actually a Parker jacket that had this pattern and a print that was a mixture of a polygraph from one of the confessions of one of the spies, and it was mixed with a source code from a virus, and that's insane. Like, he got a polygraph, which obviously ties into this idea of spies and South African spies, and mixed it with source code for a virus and made it into a print on a Parker. That is just insane. And kind of aligning with that Parker, there was another piece It was a cotton blouse and it featured a printout of an official statement given by one of the spies, and it was actually provided to him by the judicial branch of the South African government, which is also insane because I know a lot of brands now just put random newspaper prints on garments, but you are literally wearing pieces of apartheid history wearing these clothes. Like, this cotton blouse literally has a printout of the statement given by one of the spies in court. That's insane. Now, of course, you guys throughout the video, as this is kind of like a voiceover, very different to where I normally have my face in it. You guys would have seen this amazing film that came with the collection, and this was styled by the amazing Ibrahim Kamara. If you don't know who Ibrahim is, you should really check out his work. He's an amazing stylist. He is a senior editor at large at ID magazine right now, and he has actually collaborated on past collections with Thebe Magugu. So I think they have sort of an ongoing relationship. Now, in this video presentation, if you listen to it, and I won't play it for, you know, legal reasons and copyright reasons, it just featured narrations of ex-spies of South Africa's apartheid government, and these are really just the interviews that Thebe did himself, and you hear voiceovers of spies just like talking about some experiences they had as a spy, essentially. And then what I really loved and a really cool touch in this collection was that the camera angles in this collection were very reminiscent of like a secret camera that a spy would normally have. So you see camera angles like in a corner of the room and stuff like that. So I thought that was a very, very interesting touch. But I think what I love most about this collection is he literally gave us a history lesson through his clothing. And he's frequently been quoted saying he doesn't just want to give people a pretty dress. He actually wants people to, you know, think about the stuff they're wearing when they buy his clothing. And as a closing statement, I want to quote something he said. And what he said was, "It's not just about the clothes, it's that you can gain something valuable while interacting with the product." And that, in a nutshell, just tells you the mindset of Thebe Magugu. And on that note, I hope you liked the video. Comment down below your thoughts on this collection and his work. I think he's a crazy underrated designer. Subscribe to my channel if you are new. And if you want to support my channel, I am selling merch right now. So I sell tote bags, and that is, the link to that is in the description below. You'll just see my website and you can click on that link and support the channel. And on that note, I'll be back with another video very soon. So stay tuned for more content.